I should have seen the signs. Looking back, the little details were there, hiding in plain sight, taunting me like clues in a mystery novel. But let me start from the beginning, before the betrayal, before the madness, before her secret slipped out and before mine destroyed her. My name's David Sanders. I'm 36, a successful sales manager for a major tech company in New York City. I've been married to Emily for 10 years. She's 34, works as an interior designer, and the kind of woman who can make any room look like something straight out of a high-end magazine. We have 2 kids, Clara and Jake, but this story isn't about them. This is about Emily and me and the tangled mess we've become. Everything seemed perfect from the outside. We were that Instagram couple, the ones who went on family vacations to the Bahamas, posted date night selfies at fancy restaurants, and threw elegant dinner parties for friends. But behind those glossy photos, something darker had started brewing. The signs were small at first. Emily would cancel plans last minute, claiming late-night client meetings or urgent design consultations that seemed to pop up out of nowhere. She'd come home looking flustered, her makeup a little too perfect for someone who'd been working late. My gut screamed that something was off, but I pushed it down. I trusted her, and after all, she was my wife. Why would she betray me? But then, one night about 6 months ago, everything changed. It was a typical Thursday evening. I had just finished a long day at work, and Emily had once again texted me that she had an urgent client meeting. No explanation, just the usual brush-off. I remember staring at my phone for a long time, the text message burning into my brain, something twisting inside me, tightening. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, sat on the couch, and started thinking, really thinking. Maybe it was the alcohol or the stress of months of suspicion piling up, but suddenly, I realized I wasn't the fool I thought I was. If Emily was cheating on me, then I needed to catch her in the act. I grabbed my keys, deciding to follow her for the first time. The drive felt like a blur, my heart pounding in my chest. I followed her to some fancy hotel in the middle of the city. She was easy to spot in her red dress, heels clicking on the pavement, walking like she owned the place. I watched from the car, my palms sweaty, as she disappeared through the doors. I parked and walked into the lobby, feeling like a character in a bad movie, out of place but too stubborn to turn back. The moment I saw her heading up to the elevators with some tall, slick-looking guy in a suit, my blood ran cold. She wasn't even trying to hide it. I knew then she was cheating on me. And suddenly, I was flooded with 1,000 emotions all at once: anger, betrayal, disbelief. But then something unexpected happened. As I watched them step into the elevator, a strange calm came over me. I wasn't panicking or losing control like I'd imagined I would. No. Instead, my mind was racing with something else. A plan. If Emily was going to cheat on me, I wasn't going to cry about it like some idiot. I was going to get even. And that's when it hit me, I'd been doing the exact same thing for months. You see, 2 could play this game. Her name was Jessica. She was 29, a stunningly beautiful marketing executive I'd met through work. Blonde, confident, and way more fun than Emily had ever been lately. Jessica and I had started as innocent colleagues, but after one too many late-night drinks at the office, things turned physical. I never imagined I'd cheat on Emily, but after the first time with Jessica, I didn't feel the guilt I thought I would. It felt more like justice. Emily didn't know. She had no idea that every time she'd pull her client meeting stunts, I'd be spending the night with Jessica, tangled up in her bed, doing things that had long disappeared from my own marriage. But tonight was different. Tonight, I had the upper hand. I left the hotel, knowing exactly what I had to do next. As I drove home, the anger simmered inside me, but it was mixed with something else, anticipation. She wasn't going to see it coming. All those times she thought she was playing me, all those lies, were about to crash down around her. When I got home, I poured another glass of whiskey and waited. I didn't text her, didn't call, just waited. I knew exactly how this was going to play out. Emily would come home, pretending everything was normal, maybe even a little guilty, and I'd confront her, but not the way she'd expect. The hours dragged on, and I was stewing in my own thoughts, until finally, I heard her car pull into the driveway. She walked in like she always did, a fake smile plastered on her face, the smell of her perfume lingering in the air. My stomach churned. "Hey, babe," she said, tossing her purse on the counter like nothing had happened. "Long day. You wouldn't believe how crazy this new client is. He wants." I cut her off. "Emily," I said, my voice icy, "we need to deer caught in headlights." She knew I knew, but she had no idea how deep the rabbit hole really went. Part 2. The twist in the game. Emily stood there, her face losing a bit of color as my words hung in the air like an approaching storm. Her usual confidence was shaken. Finally, for months, she had gotten away with it, spinning her lies like some master manipulator, but now, she couldn't hide. I wasn't the clueless husband anymore. I wasn't blind to the game she had been playing, and the fear in her eyes told me that she knew her little game was about to end. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I had been playing my own game all along. The difference? I had no plans to lose. Sit down, Emily, I said, gesturing to the living room couch. She hesitated, her hand still on her purse like she was deciding whether to drop it or run. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how to talk her way out of this. She was good at that, too good. David, she started, her voice soft, too soft. What's this about? Did something happen? I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening around the whiskey glass in my hand. She was already trying to turn it around, to play the innocent wife card. I couldn't help but admire her nerve, but I wasn't going to make this easy for her. Not this time. Don't, I warned, my voice low and dangerous. Don't even start with the lies. The words hit her like a slap to the face. Her eyes darted toward the front door for a second, as if weighing whether she could escape whatever was coming next. But instead of running, she finally dropped her purse onto the floor and sank into the couch, her eyes fixating on me. It was clear she knew there was no way out. Okay, she said quietly. What's going on? I sat across from her, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and cold anger. Let's talk about where you were tonight, I said, making sure every word cut through the silence like a knife. Because I think we both know it wasn't with a client. Emily blinked, but she didn't flinch. Not yet. David, you know I've got a lot of late meetings with clients. It's part of the job. You've known this for years. Her voice was calm, too calm. She was still trying to play me like a fool, thinking she could slip out of this with some half-baked excuse. But I wasn't buying it, and it was time to show her just how much I knew. Is that what you're calling him? A client? I snapped. Because I saw you tonight, Emily. I followed you. I saw you walk into the hotel with him. I saw everything. I watched the color drain from her face entirely. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She was caught, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she couldn't talk her way out of it. Her hands trembled slightly, and she wrapped her arms around herself as if that would protect her from what was coming next. David, she started, but I cut her off again, this time more sharply. Don't even bother trying to deny it. I know you're cheating on me, Emily. I've known 4 months. I leaned forward, glaring into her eyes, feeling the weight of my own confession coming. But what you don't know, what you haven't even considered, is that I've been doing the exact same thing to you. Her eyes widened, shock slapping across her face like a wave crashing into her. For a split second, she looked like she didn't even comprehend what I was saying. But as the words sank in, the shock turned to disbelief, then fury. What? She whispered, as if she couldn't believe it. What did you just say? I leaned back, letting the revelation settle in the air, savoring the moment. You heard me. You're not the only one with secrets, Emily. While you were sneaking around, I was seeing someone too. Her name is Jessica. Maybe you've heard me mention her once or twice, a colleague from work. We've been close 4 months now. The look on Emily's face was priceless. Her shock quickly morphed into a cold, simmering rage. She had expected to be the villain in this story, the one holding all the cards. But now, she realized she wasn't just the betrayer, she was also the fool. She had been played, and the look of betrayal in her eyes mirrored my own. You're lying, she spat, her voice shaking with fury. You're making this up just to hurt me. I shook my head slowly, a twisted smile pulling at my lips. Oh, I'm not making this up, sweetheart. Do you really think you were the only one who could cheat? While you were out with your client, which, by the way, looks like real hard work, I've been spending my nights with Jessica. And let me tell you, she's been a hell of a lot more fun than you. Emily's face twisted with anger, her fists clenching in her lap. She wanted to scream, wanted to lash out, but she didn't. Instead, she sat there, shaking with the realization that everything she thought she knew about us, about this marriage, was a lie. Her voice was low, almost a growl when she finally spoke. How long has this been going on? Does it matter? I shot back. Long enough to know I'm done playing the fool. You wanted to cheat, and you got your wish. But don't think for a second you've been getting away with it. I've been one step ahead of you this whole time. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room felt thick with tension, the air practically vibrating with the weight of our mutual betrayal. I could see Emily struggling to hold herself together, her perfect, polished image of herself cracking in real time. But then, something changed. Her anger seemed to melt away, replaced by a strange, calm resolve. She crossed her legs, leaned back, and gave me a cold, calculating look, the kind I hadn't seen from her in years. "Is that right?" she asked, her voice steady now. "Well, I guess you're not the man I thought you were after all." Her words were meant to sting, but I felt nothing. I was beyond caring what she thought of me. "Looks like we're both not who we thought we were, Emily," I replied. "But here's the thing, I'm done with the lies. I'm done pretending that we're anything other than two people who broke something we can never fix." Emily's eyes narrowed, and I could tell she was weighing her options, trying to figure out her next move. But then, in the strangest twist, she smiled, a cold, sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You think this is over, David? You think you've won?" Her words caught me off guard, and for the first time, a sliver of doubt crept into my mind. What was she getting at? What was her angle now? And then, she dropped a bomb I hadn't seen coming. "I hope you enjoyed your little affair with Jessica," she said, her voice almost a purr, "because you're not the only one who's been getting creative with their extracurricular activities. That guy you saw me with tonight, that's just the tip of the iceberg." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "What are you talking about?" Emily's smile widened. "You think you've been clever, sneaking around behind my back. Please, David, I've been seeing 3 different men. That guy you saw me with tonight is just one of them." The room seemed to tilt, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I had expected betrayal, but this was something else entirely. You've been with more than one guy?" I stammered, my mind spinning. Emily's laughter filled the room, cold and sharp. "Oh, David, you have no idea who you've been married to. But don't worry, you'll find out soon enough." For a moment, I couldn't move. The words lingered in the air, too heavy to process. 3 different men? Emily's cold, sharp smile burned into my mind. I had anticipated anger, confrontation, even a fight, but this was beyond anything I had prepared for. She leaned back on the couch, crossing her legs like she was in control of the situation now. I could see her enjoying the look of shock on my face, basking in the power she thought she had regained. My hands tightened into fists, but I forced myself to remain calm. I wasn't about to lose it. "Not now." "You're lying," I said, more as a hope than a statement. Emily chuckled. "Am I? After everything I've admitted tonight, do you really think I'd lie about that?" My mind raced. I had followed her to the hotel, I had seen her with that man. But 3 men? How had I missed this? I had always considered myself careful, thorough in my suspicions, but Emily, she had played this game on a level I hadn't expected. I had thought catching her in the act was enough, thought that revealing my own affair would be the final blow in this war of betrayals. But now, sitting across from her, watching that smug satisfaction on her face, I realized I was in way deeper than I'd ever imagined. "Who are they?" I demanded, my voice harsher than I intended. "These other men? Who are they?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied me, taking her time, like she was savoring the moment. I hated that look. I hated how composed she seemed when just minutes ago, I had her on the ropes. It was like I was looking at a different person altogether, someone who had been hiding in plain sight for years. "Let's see," she began, tapping her chin as if she were trying to recall a casual memory. "There's Matt, the guy you saw me with tonight. He works in finance, and I met him at one of those networking events you never wanted to attend. Then there's Daniel. We actually dated briefly before I met you, and he reached out a few months ago. Oh, and there's Paul, he's the trainer at the gym I started going to. You remember when I said I wanted to get in shape?" I clenched my jaw. Of course, I remembered. She'd started going to the gym about 6 months ago, and I'd thought nothing of it. It had seemed like a healthy outlet, something that made sense for her. And Daniel? She had never mentioned anyone from her past, not in any significant way. How long had this been going on? How long had I been blind? How long? I asked through gritted teeth. "How long have you been doing this?" Emily shrugged. "Does it matter? A year, maybe more. I'm not really keeping track." "More than a year?" My mind was spinning, but even more than that, my blood was boiling. I had thought we were in a broken marriage, but there were still pieces of us that. I believed could be salvaged. But now, knowing that Emily had been living this double life for over a year, my chest tightened with fury. I stood up, pacing in front of her, trying to rein in the anger that threatened to boil over. I wanted to yell, to scream at her for making me feel like a fool for so long, but I knew that was exactly what she wanted, to see me break. "Over a year?" I spat, staring at her. "And all this time, you acted like everything was normal? You came home, you smiled at me, you played the part of a loving wife. How How could you do that? Emily tilted her head, her eyes narrowing as if she didn't quite understand the question. David, she began, her tone condescending, you're acting like you didn't do the same thing. Don't tell me you weren't smiling and playing the perfect husband when you were sneaking around with Jessica. I clenched my fists. That's different, I snapped. You pushed me to that point. You lied first. You broke us. Did I? She asked, her voice cold and unfeeling. Or did we both just get bored? You think I didn't notice how distant you became over the years? You think I didn't feel the shift? The long hours at work, the lack of interest when you came home. I knew you weren't satisfied, but I wasn't going to wait around for you to figure it out. I glared at her. So, your solution was to cheat? Her lips curled into a smile. It worked, didn't it? We're here, aren't we? I stopped pacing, my mind racing. The worst part was that she didn't seem remorseful, not in the slightest. If anything, Emily seemed empowered by her infidelity. She had taken control of her life, or at least that's how she saw it. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by this cold, calculating person sitting in front of me, who viewed our marriage as nothing more than a game she had mastered. Do they know about each other? I asked, a bitter laugh escaping me. These men, are they aware they are part of your little harem? She looked at me, unblinking, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something behind her eyes, something dark. No, she said, and they don't need to. I keep things compartmentalized. It's better that way. My stomach turned. I had expected an affair, maybe two, but not this. Emily was juggling 3 men, living multiple lives. She had built an entire existence outside of our marriage, and I was just one part of it, one piece of her puzzle. I sat down again, rubbing my temples as the weight of it all started to press down on me. I had always been one step ahead, always thought I was in control, but now it felt like I was playing catch-up in a game I didn't even know existed. So, what now? I asked, my voice low. You've got your fun. You've destroyed what little was left of this marriage. What's your plan, Emily? You want a divorce? You want to leave me for one of them? She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that grated on my nerves. Oh, David, she said, shaking her head. You still don't get it, do you? I don't need to leave. Why would I? I've got the best of both worlds. I've got you, a stable husband who takes care of everything, and I've got them for everything else. I'm not going anywhere. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The audacity, the sheer arrogance of it all left me speechless. She wasn't even pretending to feel guilty. She had no intention of ending this. In her mind, she could have it all, the marriage, the affairs, the control. And what if I leave? I asked, my voice sharper than before. What if I walk out right now, file for divorce, and take you to court for everything? Emily's smile didn't waver. If anything, it grew wider, more sinister. You could do that, she said, almost playfully. But let's be real, David. You won't. You're not the type to leave. You'll stay, just like you always have. Besides, you'd look like a fool in court trying to prove anything. What judge would believe the man who admits to cheating? Her words sliced through me, and for the first time, I realized how deep her manipulation ran. She had been preparing for this, laying the groundwork for months, maybe years. She had set me up to look like the bad guy. She had covered her tracks, woven her lies so tightly that, in the end, I'd be the one left holding the bag, while she walked away unscathed. You don't know me as well as you think, I said, my voice low but firm. I'm not just going to sit here and let you run my life. She raised an eyebrow, amused. Aren't you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I've been running it for a while now. You didn't even see it coming. The smugness in her voice sent a wave of cold fury through me. How had I been so blind? How had I let this go on for so long without seeing the signs? The late nights, the sudden interest in the gym, the subtle shifts in her behavior, it all clicked into place now, but it was too late. You think you've won, I said, standing up, the anger building inside me. You think you can control me, manipulate me, and walk all over me like I'm some doormat? Well, guess what? I'm done playing your games. Emily's smile faltered for the briefest second, but she quickly recovered, crossing her arms over her chest. Really? She asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. And what are you going to do about it, David? Run to Jessica? Tell her how awful your wife is? Good luck with that. She'll leave you the second she finds out you're just as bad as me. I clenched my fists, my mind racing. I had never wanted to hurt someone as badly as I wanted to hurt Emily in that moment, but I knew that giving into that anger would only make things worse. I needed to be smart. I needed to get out of this with my dignity intact. You want to play dirty? I said, my voice steady. Fine. Let's play. Emily's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? You think you're untouchable, that you've covered all your bases. But there's one thing you didn't count on. I leaned in closer, locking eyes with her. I've got recordings. Her face froze. For the first time all night, I saw real fear flicker across her features. Recordings, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded slowly, savoring the moment. That's right. You know all those little phone calls you made to Matt, Daniel, and Paul, the hotel rendezvous, the lies you've been feeding me? I've got them all. Audio, video, the whole package. She stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. She hadn't expected this. For once, I had the upper hand, and it felt damn good. You're bluffing, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I shook my head. I'm not. And if you think I won't use them, you're dead wrong. Emily's breath hitched, and for the first time that night, she looked genuinely scared. She had played her hand, and now it was my turn to play mine. This marriage is over, I said, my voice firm. You're not going to win this one, Emily, not this time. The silence between us was thick, charged with tension. For once, she didn't have a clever retort, no snide comment to throw back at me. She was cornered, and we both knew it. Emily's eyes flickered, the cold confidence that once radiated from her now chipped away. She was rattled, and for the first time, I could see her truly questioning everything. I sat back, watching her squirm in silence, letting the weight of my words sink in. You're bluffing, she repeated, but her voice was weaker this time, lacking the sharpness it had moments ago. I gave her a slow, deliberate smile, the kind of smile that didn't reach my eyes. You think so? I asked. How much are you willing to bet? Her gaze wavered, darting toward her phone on the table like she could fact-check me in real time. She was so used to controlling the narrative, pulling all the strings, that the idea of me having evidence threw her off balance. You think I didn't notice? I continued, my voice steady, calm, like a predator circling its prey. You think I didn't see the late-night texts, the secret phone calls, the hotel visits? I've been watching you, Emily. I've been waiting. You thought you were so clever, hiding everything in plain sight, but you forgot something important. Emily's face was pale now, her smirk long gone. What's that? She asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. You underestimated me. I leaned in, resting my elbows on my knees, locking eyes with her. You always thought you were smarter, better at playing this game. But here's the thing, you don't win by being obvious. You win by being patient. She opened her mouth to say something, but I held up a hand, stopping her. Don't bother. I've got everything I need. Months of recordings, every lie, every affair, every dirty little secret you thought you could hide. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Emily's breathing had quickened, her calm demeanor completely shattered. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to losing control. Her hands trembled as she reached for her glass of wine, but she knocked it over, sending red liquid spilling across the table. Damn it, she muttered, grabbing a napkin and wiping the mess, as if cleaning it up would somehow restore the order she was so desperately clinging to. I watched her, amused. The mighty Emily, always poised and polished, reduced to scrambling over spilled wine. It was symbolic, really. Everything she had built, all her lies, were unraveling, and she was powerless to stop it. So what? She snapped, her voice rising as she finally regained a sliver of her former self. What's your plan, David? You going to take me to court? Try to ruin me? You think anyone cares about a couple of affairs? We'll both look bad, and you know it. I shook my head slowly, enjoying how her panic bubbled beneath the surface. I don't need to take this to court, Emily. You're right, we'd both look bad, but that's not what I'm after. Her eyes narrowed, confused. Then what? I leaned back, relaxing into the couch, savoring this moment. You know what the best part about this is? I don't need to destroy you publicly. I just need you to know that that at any moment, I could release everything, every affair, every betrayal, and your perfect little world would come crashing down. Her jaw tightened, and I saw her hands curl into fists, the tension radiating through her entire body. She wasn't used to being powerless, not in our relationship, and definitely not in her little affairs. But now, she was in checkmate, and she knew it. You're a bastard, she hissed, her eyes flashing with anger. Maybe, I said with a shrug, but at least I'm honest about it. Unlike you. Emily stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She began pacing the room, her movements jerky, unsettled. I had never seen her like this, rattled, out of control. It was a far cry from the composed, calculating woman who had walked into this confrontation with the belief that she held all the cards. I did what I had to do, she muttered, more to herself than to me. You weren't there. You weren't the man I needed. You stopped caring. I raised an eyebrow. So you thought sleeping with 3 other men was the solution? She stopped pacing, her eyes blazing as she turned to face me. You don't get it, do you? I needed more. I needed something different. You became predictable, boring. I chuckled. Predictable? You mean loyal, stable, a husband who actually cared about his wife. But you couldn't handle that, could you? You needed the thrill, the drama. You were addicted to the game, not the marriage. Emily's face twisted with anger. Don't act like you're some saint, David. You cheated on me too. Don't think I don't know about Jessica. I shook my head, not denying it. I told you about Jessica because I wanted you to know. I didn't hide it, Emily. I was upfront. You, on the other hand, built an entire second life behind my back. She scoffed, crossing her arms defensively. You're trying to make yourself look like the victim here. But let's be real, you were never satisfied with me. That's why you cheated. Admit it. I stared at her for a long moment, considering her words. You're right, I wasn't satisfied, but not for the reasons you think. Her brow furrowed, the confusion evident in her expression. What are you talking about? I wasn't satisfied because I could feel you slipping away, I said quietly, the honesty in my voice cutting through the tension. I could feel you pulling away long before you started cheating. You stopped being present. You stopped caring, and I tried to fix it, Emily. I really did. But you, I paused, shaking my head, you had already checked out. You wanted something else, something I couldn't give you. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. She knew I was right. And that's why I cheated, I continued. Not because I didn't love you, but because I was tired of chasing after someone who had already left. Jessica wasn't a solution, she was an escape. Just like your affairs were for you. Emily stood there, silent, processing everything I had said. The anger in her eyes had dulled, replaced by something that looked a lot like regret. But I didn't trust it. Not anymore. So where does that leave us? She asked finally, her voice small. I shrugged. That's up to you. I'm done playing these games, Emily. I'm not going to fight for a marriage that's already dead. But I'm also not going to let you walk all over me. She looked away, biting her lip. And if I want to try again? To fix things? I laughed softly, shaking my head. You can't be serious. After everything you've done, you think we can just fix this? You've cheated with 3 different men, lied to me for over a year, and now you want a second chance? She flinched, her face crumbling. For the first time in years, I saw genuine vulnerability in her eyes, but it was too late for that. I don't know what I want, she admitted, her voice shaky. I don't want to lose everything. I stood up, looking down at her. You already have. Her breath caught, and she blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears, but I wasn't moved by her display. I had seen too much, heard too much, to be swayed by her emotions now. Here's the deal, I said, my voice firm. You sign the divorce papers, and I'll keep everything quiet. No court battles, no public humiliation. You walk away with whatever dignity you have left. Emily stared at me, the tears welling in her eyes now threatening to spill over. And if I don't, then we go to war, I said simply. And trust me, you won't win. The room was so silent I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Emily's lip quivered as she looked at me, her expression a mix of anger, fear, and resignation. She knew I wasn't bluffing anymore. She knew I was serious. I'll think about it, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded, stepping past her toward the door. Do that. As I reached the doorway, I paused and turned back to face her one last time. You always thought you were in control, Emily, but now you know how it feels to lose. With that, I walked out, leaving her standing in the wreckage of her own making. The house was quiet when I returned the next day, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions that had ravaged it the day before. It was strange, really, how silence could feel heavier than 1,000 words. The calm before the final strike. I pushed open the door, and there she was, Emily, sitting on the couch, looking as if she hadn't moved since I left, except she had changed. The aura of confidence, arrogance, and control had drained from her like air from a balloon. The Emily I had known, no, the Emily I had fought with, strategized against, was gone. In her place was a shell of the woman I'd married. A woman who finally realized she was on the losing side. I walked in slowly, letting the silence stretch between us. She didn't even glance up as I approached. She was clutching something in her hands. The papers, the divorce papers I dropped in front of her like a gauntlet the night before. Have you decided? I asked, my voice cutting through the stillness. She looked up at me then, her eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot. It was clear she hadn't slept. Her hands trembled as she held the divorce papers, the pages crinkled from where she had gripped them too tightly. She didn't look defeated, not exactly. More like someone who had finally realized the price of their choices. Emily took a long, shuddering breath, her fingers trembling as they slowly loosened their grip on the papers. "I've thought about it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I waited, crossing my arms and leaning against the wall. This was her moment, her final choice in a series of decisions that had led her here. I wasn't going to interrupt. "I don't have a choice, do I?" she said softly, staring at the papers in her lap. "You've got me cornered. I signed these, and you'll keep everything private. If I don't, you'll destroy me." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She already knew. Her lips trembled as she continued. "How did we get here, David? How did everything go so wrong?" She looked up at me then, her eyes pleading for something, an answer, absolution, understanding. But I had none to offer. "You really don't know?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. She shook her head, the slightest hint of disbelief in her expression. "I never wanted it to be like this. I thought I could have both, you know? I thought I could manage it all. The affairs, the marriage, it wasn't supposed to end like this." Her words hit me like a cold wave of indifference. She wasn't remorseful for cheating on me. She wasn't sorry for the lies or the deception. No, what bothered her most was the outcome, that she hadn't been able to keep everything under control. The regret wasn't for the affair itself but for the failure of her game plan. "That's the problem, Emily," I said slowly, leaning forward. "You've always wanted to have your cake and eat it too. You thought you could balance your double life, that I was too stupid or too distracted to notice. And even now, you're only upset because you lost control, not because of what you did." Her eyes widened, and I saw a flicker of anger flash through them. "That's not true," she snapped. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't want to hurt you." I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the quiet room. "Didn't want to hurt me? Emily, you had an affair with 3 different men behind my back. You lied to my face every single day. You didn't just hurt me, you destroyed any trust we ever had." She recoiled as if I'd slapped her, her face crumpling. "I was lost, David," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't even know who I am anymore. I was trying to fill a void, to feel something I hadn't felt in years. And what void was that, Emily? What was missing in your perfect little life that made you seek out other men? Was it excitement? Was it the thrill of getting away with it? Or were you just that selfish?" Her hands tightened into fists, but she didn't respond. I could see it in her eyes. She knew there was no justification that would make sense now. No excuse that would erase the damage she'd done. "I loved you," I continued, my voice raw with emotion. "I gave you everything I had, and it still wasn't enough for you. I was there for you, even when you weren't there for me. And instead of working on our marriage, you decided to tear it apart piece by piece." Tears streamed down her face now, her breath hitching as she tried to hold it together. "I didn't know how to stop," she whispered, her voice cracking. I made mistakes. Big ones. But David, you can't tell me you don't still feel something for me. After all these years, after everything we've been through, there's got to be something left." For a moment, I hesitated. It was a low blow, hitting her where she was most vulnerable. But then I remembered everything she had done, every betrayal, every lie, every moment she had chosen someone else over me, and the anger that simmered beneath the surface boiled over. "You're right," I said softly. "There is something left, but it's not love." Emily flinched, her face crumpling as the words hit her like a punch to the gut. "David, I feel pity," I continued, my voice steady. "I pity you, Emily. You had everything, and you threw it away for a cheap thrill. You had a husband who loved you, a life we built together, and you destroyed it. And now you're standing in the ruins of your own choices, and you want me to pick up the pieces for you." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she let out a choked sob, her shoulders shaking as the reality of it all finally hit her. I waited, watching her fall apart in front of me, my emotions a mix of anger and exhaustion. There was no satisfaction in seeing her like this, just a hollow, empty feeling that nothing could ever really be fixed. "You know," I said after a long pause, "there was a time when I would have done anything to save us. I would have forgiven you, Emily. I would have tried to rebuild what we had, even after everything you did. But that time is long gone." She looked up at me, her tear-streaked face a portrait of desperation. "David, please, don't do this. Don't leave me like this." I shook my head slowly, my heart heavy but resolute. "It's too late. You left me long before I even realized it." Her body sagged, as if all the fight had drained from her in that one moment. The papers were still clutched in her hands, and I saw her glance down at them, her expression one of quiet resignation. "Sign them," I said, my voice soft but firm. "It's the only way we can both move on." For a long, tense moment, she didn't move. Then, with a shaky breath, she reached for the pen on the table and signed her name on the dotted line. It was over. She handed me the papers without a word, her eyes avoiding mine. I took them, glancing over the signatures to make sure everything was in order. The finality of it all hit me harder than I expected. This was it. The end of our marriage. The end of us. "I'll get my things," Emily said quietly, standing up. Her voice was hollow, defeated. I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything. I watched her walk up the stairs, disappearing into the bedroom that we had once shared. A bedroom that now felt as cold and distant as the woman who had betrayed me. The house was silent again, but this time the silence wasn't heavy. It was liberating. I walked to the window, looking out at the yard. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over everything. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt free. No more lies, no more games. Just the clean slate I had longed for. When Emily came back down with her suitcase, she paused at the door. For a moment, it looked like she was going to say something, perhaps a final plea, or maybe just a goodbye. But in the end, she said nothing. She simply walked out of the door, leaving the house and me behind. I watched her go, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. It was the end of an era, but it was also the beginning of something new, something better. And as the door closed behind her, I realized that I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to destroy her. The truth was enough. Emily had destroyed herself, and I was finally free to rebuild my life without her.